Today we will be making blondies. Now blondies are a type of baked good that is similar to a brownie but doesn't have chocolate added into it. So you see, the first thing that I did was I have my apron, I put it on, make sure my hair is up because it touches my shoulders, so anything that touches your shoulders, your hair has to be up. I made sure that I washed my hands for 20 to 30 seconds with water as hot as I could stand, making sure to get between the actual fingers and going all from the wrist all the way down. Then I have my ingredients for baking. So we'll have two bowls. You'll have one for your dry ingredients and one for your wet ingredients. So the first dry ingredient is going to be flour. Now when a recipe calls for flour, it's referring to all-purpose flour. And how we always fill or measure a dry ingredient such as flour is that we fill it to overfull, and then we're going to use a straight edge spatula and we're going to level it off like so. I always like to make sure that when I'm measuring or when I'm finished with an ingredient that I will put it away. It helps you keep track of your recipe and also helps eliminate the potential of spillage. After your flour, you will need salt. So we had 250 mils of flour. Now we're going to have 2 mils of salt. 2 mils is also referred to as half a teaspoon. So I'm going to look at my measuring spoons that have your metric and imperial. Remember, it will have the metric, which is 15 mils, 5 mils, 2 mils, and 1 mil, which is the equivalent of 1 tablespoon, 1 teaspoon, half a teaspoon, and a quarter teaspoon. But I'm looking for the half teaspoon, and I've got my salt here. Going to fill it to overfull. I can even use the back of a butter knife to level off if I didn't have a straight edge spatula. So I've got my flour. Now I need to have baking powder, and make sure you know the difference between baking powder and baking soda. They're both used as leaveners to allow a baked good to rise, but usually has different amounts that we're having depending on the ingredient. So with the baking powder, you will use 2 mils of baking powder, and I'm just going to use a separate set of measuring spoons just because we don't want to cross-contaminate. So if you're cross-contaminating, it just means that you would put some of the salt with the baking powder, and we just don't want to mix our ingredients. So I'm looking for my 2 mils. I'll grab another knife as well because I'm going to level that off. So fill to overfull, and then I'm going to level it off like so. And now with the actual baking soda, which is the next ingredient that you'll be using, it's only asking for half a mil. So what we do with that is you go, hey, Miss B, what do we do? It says 1 mil is the smallest. Well, you're just going to fill it halfway with the baking soda. So I'm going to just eye it and look for about half. Okay, so now we have our dry ingredients. We can combine these dry ingredients. And I'm just going to use a rubber scraper like this, and I'm just going to combine them together just so it's incorporated thoroughly. I always have my hand on the bowl from preventing it from turning or falling off the table. So for the wet ingredients, I need 80 mils of canola oil. So 80 mils, if you look at your measuring cup, so you've got big, which is 500 mils, you've got 250 mils, and there's assorted sizes. So this one would be the 500 mil. But if you're looking at the metric side, it only does it in 50 mil increments, and it actually starts on this one at 100. Well, I know that 80 mils is actually the equivalent in imperial to 1/3 of a cup. So I find where my 1/3 is. I'm going to get to eye level, and I'm going to pour it till the actual oil reaches the bottom line of the red marking right here, which is called the meniscus. So the meniscus is just the markings that are red on this side or blue on this side. So I know it says 1/3, so I can put that oil straight into the small mixing bowl. Now I need brown sugar, and this recipe actually has quite a lot of sugar. It has 250 mils, which is again the equivalent to 1 cup. So my suggestion is that when you make this, you share some with your friends. So I know that this right here is 100 250 mils, which is 1 cup. So with brown sugar is one of those rare type of ingredients that you actually pack down into a dry measuring cup. You would also pack down butter, margarine, lard. You could even pack down peanut butter, but there's very few things that you would pack down. You'd never pack down flour, as you'd have way too much product that you need. And honestly, if a recipe says that you want to sift up the flour, you would sift the flour before you actually even measure it. You'd sift it a couple times and then you'd measure. But with these recipes, they come out like a bar. It's nice that they're actually nice and dense and chewy. So now we've got the 1 cup of sugar, and it should retain the shape of the actual container that you used. 1 egg, and now with an egg, you want to make sure that you're looking for the roundest part of the egg. And I'm actually going to just crack it onto the table. A lot of people think that you should crack it on the side, and sometimes that does work, but often what will happen is the shell will break and will fall in the bowl. No problem, if the shell does break and fall into the bowl, you will actually use the other side of the shell to scoop that actual shell out. It's the best way to get the shell out. But here, we crack, so I just hit the roundest part, pull it apart. Now you want to make sure you're looking to see if it's a really fresh egg. Okay, let's see. So that it has a nice bright yolk, that the egg white is nice and clear. Working with egg, you want to make sure you wash your hands right away after, because eggs have salmonella or campylobacteria, and you want to make sure you're trying to prevent any type of foodborne illness. So always wash your hands after working with egg. There we go. And I'm going to get a fork, and I'm just going to use that to whisk. If I had a larger bowl, then I would just use a whisk. So this is just a regular fork and a whisk. Is that you could use a whisk to actually beat up the egg, but I'm just going to, on a slight angle, break up the egg so that the color will actually turn into a nice pastel color. I can pour that in to this mixture, and people say, oh, well, Ms. B, the brown sugar is not really a dry ingredient, is it? It's like, no, it's more of a we'd consider of a moist ingredient, but we're going to make it part of actual wet ingredient for this recipe. Okay, so I'm going to mix these together, and you'll see what will happen is it actually is going to start to look like a caramel. And I do have one more ingredient that I haven't put in yet. It is the vanilla extract. You need 2 mils of vanilla extract. You always want to fill over a separate custard cup, which this is the custard cup, just in case you spill. So I'm going to fill, this one is actually just a 1 mil because I could not find a 2, so I'm just going to do this twice. 1, and then I'm going to do twice. And so any spillage I can actually just put back into the container. Mix together, and now what I'm wanting to do is I'm wanting to fold my ingredients. So I'm going to make what we say is a well in the flour, and I will start to actually put the mixture in. And this is a pretty fail-proof recipe. Often you'll add just the flour to the wet ingredient, but I find this one actually works pretty well with just having the well, and then we're going to be folding. So folding is when my arm is stationary and I turn, so it's my wrist. So people go, oh, Miss B, I don't get the folding bit. So it's my wrist that is turning. It's not, I'm not going like this to actually blend it. I'm just trying to gently incorporate it. Now, when you guys will do this lab, on the first day, you will have all your dry ingredients we'll put in a Ziploc bag, and we'll have your wet ingredients we're going to put into a container, and we'll have it in the fridge. Then, when you come back the next day, we'll actually have the nice batter that we'll put into a 8x8 custard cake, 8x8 cake pan. So I find if you just manipulate, move the parchment down, press it down, and then you just come right up above it, and you can actually just push it down like this. I can press it down, and what you're trying to do here is just make it nice and even. And if you see any bits of flour that still aren't incorporated, you can just take your actual rubber scraper. And on your day 2 lab, you'll be pressing your dough into your parchment paper and your 8x8 cake baking pan, and then you're going to cook it. So if we turn it over, it says bake for about 22 minutes. So I'm going to do that. Now I'm just going to put this into the oven and I'll bake it for 22 minutes. Always wear your oven mitts and always pull the door all the way down. Let people in your unit know that you're opening your oven by saying oven or behind. That just gives people some awareness that there's a potential dangerous situation. After the blondies have cooked in the oven, you want to make sure you use oven mitts to take them out. And you can actually let the blondies sit in the cake pan for about 5 minutes, and then you can just lift the blondies straight out using the parchment paper. You will then, using a butter knife, you can just cut and have a nice piece over here. The blondies will have a bit of a fudgy texture. They should be nice and set, but you'll really want to leave it set. Allow it to cool a bit to really set to be a really nice chewy type of dessert. I would suggest, like I said, even a quarter of this is a lot of sugar, is to give some to your friends because when they get me in their expos, then they will give some to you. So I hope this was informative of how to make your yummy, delicious blondies and how to measure properly.